Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the Prospective Plantings and March 1 Grain Stocks webinar. My name is Andy Miller with DTN, and I'll be your moderator today. With me, as always, is Todd Hultman, Lead Market Analyst for DTN. And during this event, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. You may ask questions at any time during this event, and to do so, please click on the Q&A option located at the bottom right of your screen. This will open up a messaging panel where you can submit questions to the webinar panelists. We will address all questions at the end of the webinar after Todd finishes sharing his report. And one other note, this event is being recorded and a rebroadcast link will be on the DTN website within the next 2 business days. And as a reminder, our website is dtn.com. With that, I think we're ready to begin, so I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us today here. We're going to take a look at USDA's reports of prospective plantings and also the March 1 grain stocks. It's maybe a little hard to believe. It's that time of year already. We just had snow here earlier this week and across much of the northern Midwest, but it won't be long. We will be seeing planting activity pick up before too long. So today's March survey by USDA was conducted in the first half of March, and USDA said there were 71,800 farm operators surveyed. So as you may know, if you've read our DTN previews, this is often an uncertain report. It's hard to be too confident on what USDA says in this survey. And usually the culprit, if something goes wrong with today's estimates, is going to be weather. But just for now, it's the best estimates we have. So let's go ahead and dive in and take a look and see what USDA said. For the new 2024 year, USDA is estimating corn plantings at 90 million acres. That's less than expected. Our average trade guesses from Dow Jones were showing 92 million acres. There were some private analysts that were above the 92, but here USDA comes out with an estimate of 90 million acres. That's down 4.6 million from a year ago. And of course, a year ago, corn plantings got a big boost from the terms of crop insurance that aren't near as favorable this time around. So I think that's part of the story here. And of course, prices are much lower than they were a year ago. For soybeans, USDA estimates 86.5 million acres. That's up 2.9 from a year ago. I think the encouraging thing to me is that at least we're getting back closer to a 50-50 mix. Corn still has the advantage, but today's increase in soybean acres is a little encouraging, and I would think encouraging to the crush plants out there that are getting going and are going to need some soybeans, obviously, to keep things running smooth. Wheat acres, 47.5 million acres. That was close to the estimate today, just slightly under the estimate. But as we'll see, the wheat varieties had a couple of different stories, and we'll get into that more in just a minute. But overall, I should note too, the 3-crop total of today's USDA estimates, 224 million acres, is actually down 3.75 million acres from last year. So there are some acres lacking in this mix. And given the low prices, I think maybe it's not surprising that they're trying to find some different alternatives of what to plant this year. So we'll get into a little more of that as well. For the top corn states, now these are the top 8 corn states with the biggest area of corn planting last year. This is what this year's changes look like. Of course, the big 2, Iowa and Illinois, each showed 300,000 acres less on the planting changes for corn. Small reduction in Nebraska. Minnesota had the biggest reduction on the board, down 700,000 acres from a year ago. South Dakota, like Iowa and Illinois, are also down 300,000 acres. Kansas, just a slight change. Indiana came down 350,000 acres, and North Dakota came down 250,000 acres. So overall, it was pretty widespread, the reduction in corn acres this year, but definitely Illinois and Iowa contributing their share, and Minnesota coming off with the biggest reduction. And I have to wonder if concerns maybe about dry conditions in Minnesota affected those totals at all. The top 8 soybean states, now we saw reductions across the board for corn. Now we're seeing increases across the board for soybeans. The top 2, I would say modest gains for Illinois and Iowa. Illinois up 150,000 acres, Iowa up 250,000 acres. Minnesota also up 150. The big boom coming in North Dakota, 700,000 more acres than a year ago of soybeans, and you have to wonder if that new crush plant is helping to attract a little business. Missouri up 400,000 acres, Indiana up 250, and small increases for Nebraska and South Dakota. So outside of North Dakota and Missouri, small changes overall, but again, everybody's showing some participation in today's higher soybean planting estimate. The wheat categories I mentioned, if we break down to the types of wheat, we see winter wheat acres came in at 34.1 million. That was a million less than the trade was expecting, and it's down from 36.7 million a year ago. Other spring wheat acres, on the other hand, came in slightly higher than expected at 11.3 million acres, and that's up slightly from a year ago total. The durum acres, I don't know if there's any pasta lovers out there, but there's a lot of concern about short durum supplies over the past year. There is going to be a small increase in plantings of durum ahead, 2 million acres versus 1.7 million a year ago. Again, the overall wheat total came in at 47.5. That was very close to expectations, but obviously winter wheat planting's getting the more bullish influence there. Spring wheat acres being slightly bearish on today's estimates. As far as other smaller crops, the changes were actually pretty small for the most part. Cotton acres are expected to be up 440,000 acres in 2024. USDA is looking for almost 10.7 million cotton acres. Barley is the one with the biggest change this year, up 530,000 acres. USDA is looking for about 2.6 million acres there. A modest reduction in sorghum acres down to 6.4, and for sunflowers, a reduction of 360,000 acres. But as you can see, overall, the changes are fairly slight there. Barley showing the biggest change of getting increased. Oh, wait. Now the chart shows, let me double check here. The chart shows barley down, but I wrote barley up 3.1. Yeah, barley acres are down 530,000. My mistake in the text on the right. Sorry about that. So the barley total is down 530,000, not up. What's the landscape look like for planting this year? So far, we don't see any excessively wet areas at this time that we would expect much in the way of prevented plantings. Much of the northern plains are still on the dry side. Of course, we got some more moisture this week with the winter storm that passed through, and today's drought monitor did show a little drought improvement in Iowa and southern Minnesota. That may help, but overall, and unless some kind of heavy rain set in for a long time, we don't expect any planting difficulties on a large scale at this point. It looks like we ought to have a fairly good planting season once these temperatures start warming up. Okay, we also had a grain stocks report today from USDA, and that's the report that always gets my attention the most because when we do actually count where the corn is at and how much there is, sometimes it upsets USDA's previous estimate totals. So this is the one check and balance we have in the system, and I'm always glad to see this report. Today, March 1 corn stocks came in at 8.347 billion bushels. That was 102 million bushels below what the trade was estimating. So we have a little more active demand going on in the first half of the year for corn than was expected, and that added a little bit to today's higher corn price, which I'll try to mention before we sign off toward the end what the markets are doing. Even so, we still have to acknowledge the corn supplies for March 1 are still the highest in 5 years. And the other thing I would mention about corn, I believe the amount held on farms, 5.08 billion bushels, is up 24% from a year ago. So that's where the concern's at for corn prices moving forward, is just when is that corn going to leave the farms, and under what circumstances. So still could be a tough market there. Soybean stocks came in very close to expectations today, 1.845 billion bushels. As you can see on the chart, that's the red bar in the far right. It's up from 1.687 billion bushels a year ago, but you can still put it in this lower grouping of soybean supplies that we've had over the past 4 years. Yes, supplies are up somewhat, modestly, I would say, from a year ago, but not excessive at this point. One other note I want to insert in here while we're talking about the soybean market. Here in the month of March, we've seen a dramatic improvement in the price of soybeans in Paranagua, Brazil. And if you recall, in January, we saw a very sharp drop in those prices, and it really had a bearish influence on our U.S. soybean prices here at home. At one point in late January, the difference between the Brazilian price and the U.S. price at a March FOB basis at that time was over $1.75 a bushel. Now that gap has narrowed to 66 cents a bushel, roughly. And largely it's been because we've seen a 180-degree turn in China's attitude toward the market. We've seen very strong buying from China in soybeans in the month of March, mostly Brazilian beans. But keep in mind that still benefits us, because the quicker they get through Brazil's beans, the sooner they'll come buying our beans in late summer or fall. So I just wanted to note there's been one piece of very good news for us in March, and it's been nice to see that that gap with Brazil's price narrow. March 1 wheat stocks came in a little higher than expected. 1.087 billion bushels is up from 941 a year ago. The trade was expecting 1.05 billion bushels. This March 1 stocks is the highest in 3 years. And of course, in the wheat season, we only have until May 31st. So we're coming down to the end of the year, just a couple more months left. And it's quite possible that we're going to need a higher ending stocks estimate from USDA before it's all done. And it's not that we've had an overabundance of wheat supplies, but we just haven't been able to move them. The exports, again, have been among the lowest in over 50 years. So it's continuing to have a difficult time moving our wheat supplies here in the US. Well, as I said, it would be somewhat short today, not a lot of numbers, but they certainly are important and have implications for the season ahead. In conclusion, I would say the report was definitely bullish for corn today. Seeing that 90 million acre planting estimate gives corn a little bit of encouragement. And we also had a little bit lower corn stocks than were expected. Let me mention before I forget, there we go. Right now, corn prices are up 14 cents in the May contract at 4.41. May soybeans are down 3 cents, 11.89 and a quarter. And May Kansas City wheat is up 3 3/4. Chicago contract up 9 3/4. But the Minneapolis wheat down 6.5 on that higher than expected estimate. So for today, I'm saying neutral for soybeans. Basically, the higher planting intentions are slightly sorry, not the planting intentions. You can ignore those comments under soybeans. That's my mistake there. Sorry, but soybeans are neutral today. basically the planting intentions came in as expected, as did the grain stocks numbers. So no big shakes there. And on wheat, I'd say we also had a neutral report. The wheat stocks were a little bearish, but for winter wheat, the acres came in a little less than expected, and the spring wheat acres came in a little more than expected. So pardon my goof there on the soybean comments, but I think that gives you a good view and a picture of what today's report looked like. Do we have any questions, Andy?
Well, our list of questions is short and sweet, just like your presentation today. We only have one, but I will read it to you. Here we go. Given the soybean acreage increase in relatively lower yielding states, do you think the yield projections would be much more important this May through August? And also, the drought in North Dakota is persisting with 700,000 more acres, which may offset potential. So,
Uh,
what are your thoughts on that?
yes, and whoever asked that, you are absolutely correct to point out that the acreage changes in North Dakota are not the same as we might think if we had the same acreage change in Iowa. It is a lower yielding state, and so for that reason, it does not have as big of an impact on the market as it might look on the particular chart today. So that's a fair point. Um, but today's estimates were all about the planning area, so that's what we're dealing with today. But you make a very fair point, and I wouldn't be too concerned. Well, let's put it this way. Yes, I'm concerned about the potential for dry conditions in the Western Corn Belt and the entire Western Plains this year. And of course, John Brannick and Bryce Anderson both in his columns as well has warned us about the potential of what La Nina could bring this summer, especially to the Western Plains. So that will definitely remain an ongoing concern. And as you know, these planning estimates here in March may or may not be close. they they haven't always been. We'll get more updated estimates with better information at the end of June, and we have a whole season of weather ahead of us. So best wishes for a good season, but we've got a lot in front of us, a lot more than we know about right now.
All right, you're not off the hook yet. We just had another question come in.
Fair.
You mentioned a favorable planting season. The weather 2 weeks ago suggested perhaps some early planting. Are you anticipating much early planting?
It sounds the latest forecasts we've seen or I've seen from DTN suggested that the month of April um, could be fairly dry overall, so that would help. But the eastern half of the Corn Belt looks like they're going to still have below average temperatures. So, of course, we'll see progress in the south as we always do. The progress in the month of April may not be overly conducive to getting a big start. We'll have to see how guys actually feel about getting into the fields, given the soil temperatures in their area. But once we get to May, it looks like all green light. We're going to have chances for both showers, not overly heavy showers, but also above normal temperatures in the month of May. So I don't think we'll have any, say, hangover problems into June or anything like that. I just don't see any major hurdles at this point.
All right. Well, that covers the questions. And with that, since that's the last part of our webinar, I'll just say thank you to everybody for joining today. Again, quick reminder that this event was recorded, so if there's anything you want to go back and look through, we will have this webinar and Todd's analysis up within the next 2 business days on dtn.com. And if you have additional questions, Todd, as always, is gracious enough to put his contact information here. Please reach out to Todd if needed. That said, thank you once again. This concludes our event, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.